when you joined the service?
So somebody said 20 or 21, I don't know.
19.
So you're 19, 20 years old when you joined.
After I got a high school, right out of high school, I got a job without a COLA. And that's when Uncle Sam says, come on.
So you were drafted?
Yeah.
Okay. And what theater of operation were you? You were in the European theater? In Europe? You served in Europe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you first go to England?
The boat left from New York. And we eventually ended up in New England.
What did you think of England?
Well, I'll tell you. We were there about 6 weeks before we went in for the invasion. There was a girl, she drove one of them double-decker buses, and I went out with her a couple of times. And one time I went by her house, and her father answered the door, and he says, "Keep away from my daughter, you goddamn Yankee."
Did you see her again after that?
And then another thing, there was a few colored people in my outfit. He told the English girls that they're night fighters, that they're painted black because they fight at nighttime.
So, and you were in the Normandy invasion, were you not, a couple of days after it started?
About 3 days then.
3 days
About 3 days.
after Normandy. Yeah. Can you tell us what that experience was like? What did you feel like? Were you afraid? Were you shot at? I mean, what, can you kind of relive that a little bit, what it was like to be there at that time?
Well, the Germans retreated to a little town. I can't think of the name of it, but it's about 30 miles away. And they're going to try a mass bombing. Everything that flew, all one time, they all went to bomb the Germans. But most of the firearms went on our side, and there was a big shot general come from the States. He wanted to see that mass bombing. He got killed.
Oh.
But our people.
Were you ever shot at?
Oh yeah, I was climbing a fence for one reason I don't remember, but somebody was shooting at me with a machine gun because I could hear the bullets go. And hey, he's one of us. And then another time, 2 of us were in a Jeep. We were going back to get more supplies, and this airplane circled over us, and then he hit it right for us. We jumped out of that Jeep so fast, and I hid behind a house.
Have there been any times you think that you almost got killed?
Yeah. One time my foot, my heel was hurting, so I took my shoe off, and there was a piece of shrapnel in my shoe, so in my heel. So if that thing was my heel, it could have went anywhere on me.
I know a lot of soldiers who were going in on the invasion of D-Day. They were afraid that they would have whether or not they would have the courage to do it, to go through with it. Did you find yourself being scared and sometimes struggling to find the courage to go on?
you go where they tell you.
Okay. What do you think was the most challenging experience that you had during your service years? Anything stand out as the most terrifying or challenging that you had to face?
Well, like I said, one time, what I said was, when I had that shrapnel in my heel, could have went anywhere. And then that airplane, it was coming down on us. If we didn't see that airplane.
Wow.
And we were, I can't think of the name of the town. We met the Russians over there. And here comes the last plane of Hitler's. Dropping his anti-personnel bombs and went right in the foxhole with this fellow from New York. He killed him. So he's the last guy that was killed during World War II.
Wow.
And we crossed the bridge and we were hugging what's that big country?
You're talking Holland or Germany?
No,
Russia?
It goes east.
East? Czechoslovakia? Poland? Austria?
Well, anyway,
Yugoslavia?
it had been a long time ago.
Yeah, sure. Wow. Did you have any friends in the service that were killed?
I mean, what?
Any friends that were killed? Were any of your friends killed when fighting in Europe?
You mean friends from back home?
No, friends that you made in the service?
Oh, we were out friends.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I can't answer that.
Okay. You fought in Normandy. I thought I heard that maybe you also fought in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Well, the Germans would get surrounding us, and in about a 30-mile. So we tried to break out of there before we got captured. And then that's when like I told you, that's why my heel was hurting me. And there was a piece of shrapnel in my heel. That's pretty close.
Yeah, yeah. So you weren't in Bastogne, though? Were you in Bastogne? The city that the Germans surrounded, and you had the general there who they wanted him to surrender, and he gave him, who was a general, can't think of his name at the moment, and his reply was just nuts. No, doesn't ring a bell?
Well, I can tell you one thing. The Germans were going to invade England, and they sent a whole lot of planes across the channel to take over England. And there was a storm that they never saw such a storm before, and most of them ships belonged to the Germans. Most of them ships get sunk, or if it wouldn't be for that big storm, why they would have taken over England. Maybe they would have come to the States too, I don't know.
Scary.
No, that's so long ago.
Oh yeah. Are there any memories that you have, sir, or stories that you have not shared with your friends or family at any time?
No, but we used to have an army reunion every year in a different city. And there were, I don't know how many would attend one of them. And as time went by, we had to cut that out because there were very few people living out. I was the youngest one.
And how old are you?
Hold on.
Yes.
96. 96.
96.
My sister's about 100, about 93. And I read, if you don't smoke, you could live about 8 years longer. And which is true. I mean, my sister, we never smoked. But my other two sisters, they had a cigarette in their mouth all the time. They both died in their 60s.
Oh,
That shows you they don't smoke. That's the hardest thing in the world to quit.
Do you have any memories of some really good times that you had when you were in Europe, fighting in Europe? Is there anything that stands out where you were just saying, boy, this was really a good experience, I'm glad I had it?
Well, somewhere in France, we weren't moving anywhere. We were just standing still. So they let a couple of people at a time go to Paris, and we all had to learn one word before we went to Paris. Voulez-vous coucher avec moi?
And that means?
Will you sleep with me?
Okay. And were you successful?
I don't know. I wish so.
Okay. I'll have to have you write that down next time I go to Paris. Based on the experience that you had fighting in World War II, do you have any message, any suggestion?
Well, my job, the 30th Division included artillery, for artillery guns. I forget what I'm going to say.
Sorry, take your time. We can come back to that if you think of it. I'm just wondering, there are a lot of younger people, even people in their 30s who are not at all familiar with World War II.
The reason my kids there because I was there.
Exactly. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about what you would tell these people in the 30s about why World War II was important and they should know about it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, look at World War I. That happened, 20 years before I was born. And we knew nothing about that.
Okay. Do you think it would be important, though, for the younger generations to study and learn about World War II? I mean, you made a big sacrifice there. It'd be a shame if that were forgotten.
Yeah.
No? What was it like coming home after you got discharged from the Army?
Well, what was they going to say? When we were in England, about 6 weeks before the invasion, there were a few colored people in my outfit. And they used to tell them colored girls, they're night fighters. They fight at the nighttime, that's why they're painted black.
Okay. But how about when you came home after you got discharged? Did you have a hard time readjusting to civilian life?
The government says they have to give us our job back, if at all possible. So I worked, I only had one job my whole life. I worked at Alcoa.
And what'd you do there?
I run machines.
Okay.
And that's when aluminum wheels became popular through Alcoa making them.
Sure.
They lot less than iron wheels. Therefore, when they pull into a place to see the weight they're carrying, they can carry more weight because the aluminum wheels were lighter. Yeah, very few people went through the thing. Well, I was one of the first ones in my neighborhood that got discharged. So, oh, there's another thing that they got a name for this, but I can't think of it. How many soldiers that were overseas for over a year, their wives had babies. Many of them. How could that be?
A miracle. And I only have a couple more questions here. And if you have some, you can answer. But many soldiers that came back from the war, or even Vietnam or Korea, they had, post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, a disorder, I guess. Do you think you had any residual negative emotional effects from your experience? No? Okay. What was your attitude towards the German people itself, not the soldiers, but the German people itself?
Well, I always used to think of taking one American and one German side by side, and they both got a gun. Why should I kill him? Why should I kill him?
Did you have the opportunity to interact with German population, the people, when you were there, the cities that you captured? No, you didn't have a chance?
But Hitler ran the whole German outfit. Hitler.
Yeah.
So my son-in-law, he's got his nose in that book all the time, and he looked under that name Hitler. His name was really Schicklgruber.
Yes, I'm surprised you knew that. Not many people did. Yeah, he took the name of, I think, an aunt or an uncle or something.
Yeah, I got a son-in-law that anything you want to know, let me look at the book.
Okay.
No, I know nothing about that kind of stuff.
You had a brother that served in the army, didn't you?
Yeah, he about 8 years older than me, and we were about 30 miles inland. And somebody in my outfit says, you got a brother named John Vitigoj. I says, yeah, he's with us. Well, I hated to hear that because by that time I knew what it was all about.
Mm-hmm.
So about half a mile up the road, I went to see him naturally in a foxhole. Everybody had a foxhole. And he said, that reminds me, you lent me $5 before we went to the German. Before we went to the army at $5. So he paid me $5 in French money. He got wounded and eventually he lost his leg.
Oh.
He was 8 years older than me.
8 years older? Okay. Do you have any other suggestions or questions?
I have two
Okay.
stories that I'm thinking of.
One was a holiday dinner in a foxhole, was a chocolate bar.
Chocolate bar and then, he was in Magdeburg when the war ended in Germany on the Elbe River. the Americans came, he came through Belgium and Holland and Germany, and when he got to Magdeburg, the American boys had to wait until the Russians caught up. And then he said for one day, the bridge was open, the Russian boys came across, the American boys came across, they hugged and kissed and danced. One day. Next day, it was down, the beginning of the Cold War. They never saw them again. So that was the contact they had waiting for the Russians, and then just one day of celebration.
Well, one day we're hugging the Russians and they're hugging us.
Yeah.
One day.
Well, let me have you go back a little bit because people listening to this would not have heard
Didn't
your
hear
daughter.
me.
So can you tell us what it was like on the day when you met the Russians? Can you kind of go back to that day at the beginning and tell us what it was like?
Oh, we were all happy. We figured it's all over now. Did I tell you that one German plane they had one left, so they come and drop some anti-personnel bombs on us. And we all jumped in our foxholes, and one of the bullets went, one of them shrapnels, or bombs, whatever you call them, went right in a hole with the guy, with one of our friends from New England somewhere. So he was the last one to get killed.
Yeah. And what was it like meeting the Russians in that town right at the time the war ended? You had to cross a bridge to meet them?
Oh yeah, we hugged them one another. One day that lasted one day.
And what happened after that?
Well, you know, then they always had trouble with the Russians.
And I hear that you guys had a fancy dinner in a foxhole.
What?
You had a nice dinner, a banquet in a foxhole? Do you remember that?
Oh.
No? Okay, that's fine.
Oh, one more. Okay. Tell him, where were you when they declared that, okay, you were coming home on the Queen Mary
Yeah.
from England,
Yeah.
and you guys were halfway across, and you would have had to come home and get ready to go to the Pacific. But halfway across on the Queen Mary, they said VJ Day, victory over Japan, and that meant it was over. Do you remember?
Yeah, we was one of the first ones in my neighborhood, first ones of the boys, that they got discharged. And they were there with the bridge right there for when the army, me and a couple of friends of mine. We worked second shift, and we used to go have a drink and a sandwich. And, so I went to that bridge right when I got discharged. It was loaded with women. And little by little, the women disappeared. You know, the husbands were coming home.
Daddy, how did you get home from England? When you came home after the war, how did you get back to the States?
By boat.
Did you come on Queen Mary?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then while you were on Queen Mary, they said that the Japanese war ended? Can you tell him that story? Because that's good. That's a good story.
Well, yeah, I think we were supposed to go back to the States and get more training and fight the Japanese. The war ended there.
And then what happened?
Well, they couldn't discharge the people fast enough. And Uncle Sam says, wherever you worked before you got drafted, they have to give you your job back, if at all possible. So I worked all my life without clothes.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
No.
What was your delicious dinner in a foxhole, Dad?
What did
A
they-
chocolate bar?
What'd they give you in the foxhole for holiday dinner? Chocolate bar?
Oh, yeah. Always, what holiday? What holiday was it?
Thanksgiving, maybe?
Yeah. Everybody had a big meal except me because I was hiding in the basement someplace because there were German soldiers on the first floor. They didn't look in the basement. Here I was.
Ooh, that must have been scary.
Sure it was. And I was just a kid myself.
And how did you get out? Did the soldiers leave?
Did you tell him what your job was? What was your job? What did you have to do?
Well,
In the service, you carried half the radio and you had to climb up all the bell towers and tell the guns where to shoot.
you know, people carried them little radios. Well, this big deal. But them days, it took two people to carry that radio. So whenever the officer would go close to the front line so that he could tell our artillery where to fire. A little to the left or a little to the right. So my job a whole lot of the time was carry half a radio. Now they get little boxes like that.
Yeah. So did you have to go with your radio up to the front to observe where the soldiers were so that you could call back to tell them where to shoot? So you were basically on the front of the front lines. Yeah, that must have been scary. Anybody have anything else?
I think that's pretty much the highlight ones.
Okay.
The stories we know by heart.
Were there any times he thought he might not be coming back?
Yeah.
Were there any times, sir, that you thought you might not be coming back, that you would get killed? Okay.
Well, I played old lucky so many times.
Are you a religious man?
Right.
Are you a religious man?
Yeah.
Did you pray when you were in the...
Oh, tell me.
Okay.
We always did a lot of praying.
Okay, are we... Is there anything else that you would like to say?
What was your favorite dinner in a foxhole, Jim? What was your favorite dinner in a foxhole? Chocolate bar?
They call them box lunches. In the little box there would be a piece of meat, piece of bread, maybe fruit.
Often they used to bring food, sneak out and bring you food to the foxholes.
You know,
Didn't the girls,
oh,
the farm girls, come out and bring you
you
food?
know, we were here, the Germans were there, and here comes a little girl, right between the line of fire, right towards us, and gave us a sandwich.
That must have been amazing to see that. How old was the little girl?
I don't usually, but if I remember, maybe about 10 years old.
Wow. Were the sandwiches good? Okay.
Well, you know, I never was a fussy eater. Because when I was a kid growing up, my father died young, and my mother had a nervous breakdown, and we tough time when we were growing up.
But you did okay.
I can't believe I'm 96 years old either. And my sister is, what, how old is she?
98. 98.
Wow. Beautiful. After you got discharged, and were getting discharged, and maybe coming back home on the Queen Elizabeth, was it?
Queen Mary.
Queen Mary. Okay.
That was a big boat.
Yeah. What was the thing you were just looking forward to? What did you want to do first when you got home, besides see your family?
Was it-
No.
was there a favorite food
Yeah,
or
yeah.
a drink that you were thinking of?
Okay.
We hugged one.
I'm sorry?
I suppose we hugged one another.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, anyway, I'm shooting for 100.
Yes, well, I wish you well. I hope you get there. I'm going for 104.
Me too.
My sister's 90,
98.
98.
98, yeah.
Oh, well then, definitely. Is she the younger sister or the older sister?
No, she's the older.
Second oldest, yeah.
The other one smoked.
Oh, right, yeah, of course.
When the war was over, you know what happened to Hitler? He went down the basement with his girlfriend and he committed suicide.
I imagine you were very happy to hear that.
Sure, he took over half of the world.
Well, thank you very much for your service.
Yeah, I ain't going nowhere. I'll tell you one thing, I got two good girls. I brag about it.
You should. I've met them both.
I had an opportunity to take his army book. He has that army book where it's like a diary the guys all put together of all their experiences. And when I went to Europe, I followed the trail through France, went to all the towns. And, they had statues and thank you things all over. And I asked my dad, I said, are you going to go back for the reunion? And he said, nope, once was enough.
This was in World War II. My father came from some little town, I don't remember the name of it. The Germans were taking the priest away.
Oh, this is an important story.
The Germans were taking the priest away, so my relatives had to start fighting with them soldiers. So they lined up everybody with my name in.
Wow. And this was in Germany?
Slovenia.
In Slovenia?
Yeah, they went into his town, where his family's
The
from.
town of his, where his relatives that didn't emigrate in 1910 were still there. When the Nazis came down, they usually would try to take out the power that either the mayor or the priest had in the village, and that would intimidate the people. And when everybody in his family stood up for the priest, which happened to be his cousin, is when they just took the whole families out.
Wow.
So we saw that when we went to Slovenia. We saw in fact, the priest had a great big memorial on the side of the church. We were looking all over the graveyard for this priest, because we know the story, but it was up there. It was on the side of the church. Then we went to the little tavern. You have the church and the tavern in every little town, and a grapevines. And we went there, so we went to the tavern to see if anybody there knew the story, to make sure we were in the right place. And this one little waitress, she knew English. So she asks the old guy sitting at the bar, if they knew the story, and he says, everybody knows that story. And then he told us that there was a woman down the road that had that maiden name. So we found a cousin because we went in the bar,
Nice.
and then we got that connection. And then the little gal, she must have been a teenager who was working there, we waited till she got off work, and then she took us down the road and entered, because I said, what are we going to say to these people? Hi, the Americans are home, 100 years, we're back. You know, so she took us down there and introduced us to the family, and we had an opportunity, and they were so excited. They wanted to know what we look like, and you know, and everything. And then his cousin, who is very old, she went to the closet and she brought out a box that was wrapped in blankets, and it had pictures of this priest in the coffin and pictures of their stories. So actually her family got to hear these stories that a lot of them weren't that familiar of. But it was just one of those God moments.
Yeah.
You know, he just puts all the pieces together. And I had two of my granddaughters there with me, and they were little, so they got to hear it. And her granddaughter living in Germany spoke English very well, so she translated from the old woman, you know. So, I mean, it was just, it was wonderful.
And how long ago was this?
That must have been maybe 12, 13 years ago we were there. So,
You still keep in touch?
you know, we did for a while, and then something happened with the email, you know, and they went back to Germany, and I kind of lost track of them. But it was a good, and you know what happened, the worst part was, we were doing a trip to Romania to work with orphan kids. We knew a lady who used to take them out of Timișoara in the orphanage and take them to the mountains in southern Romania. And we were parked in Romania, and somebody broke into the van and stole the camera and all the pictures. So all the stuff that we had from the Slovenian trip was gone. You know, in fact, we're going back to Romania next month, and we're visiting these orphan kids who now have children of their own. So we're going to go visit all of our Romanian grandkids in October. So,
Very nice.
so but we have this travel bug with my dad, even though, you know, he didn't want to go back to Europe. You know, he and my mom, boy, they love to travel. So my husband and I think we're gypsies at heart. You say go, we pack suitcases. You know, we go.
And the Romanians were basically the heart of the gypsies.
Yeah, yeah. But
That's
you know,
why they call them Romanos.
yeah. And then under Ceausescu, they couldn't use birth control or anything, and he wanted to build up the population. They were still under communism, and that's why all those kids were in the orphanages.